Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
A sharp slap landed across my face as my brother Jake demanded I cancel my cancer screening to drive him to his baseball game. My parents stood behind him, faces twisted in familiar disappointment. His scholarship opportunities matter more than your paranoid health concerns, my father spat. My mother nodded in agreement. Always the selfish daughter. Blood trickled from my lip as I realized in that moment, after 27 years of sacrifices, I was done being their family scapegoat. I never wanted much from life. A decent job, good health, maybe someone to share my days with eventually. My name is Everett Thompson, 27 years old, and until last month, I lived in the same house in Lakewood, Ohio, where I grew up. I work as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech company, a job I genuinely enjoy despite the long hours. But in my family, my achievements always paled in comparison to my younger brother Jake's baseball prowess. From the moment Jake could hold a bat at age 4, my parents decided he was destined for the major leagues. Every birthday, every Christmas, every family conversation revolved around Jake's latest game, his batting average, or which college scouts might be watching him next. Meanwhile, I was the dutiful older brother, expected to cheer from the bleachers and understand when family resources flowed in one direction. Everett, we need to use your college fund for Jake's summer training camp, my father announced during my junior year of high school. I had been saving for MIT, maintaining perfect grades while working weekends at the local hardware store. Jake has a real shot at something special. You understand, right? You can always go to community college. I understood all right. I understood that in the Thompson family hierarchy, my future was always negotiable. I attended Ohio State on scholarships and loans instead, working 30 hours weekly to cover expenses. I still graduated with honors in computer science, landing a good job right out of college. No one from my family attended the graduation ceremony. Jake had a tournament that weekend. Your brother has a gift, my mother would say whenever I showed signs of resentment. We have to nurture that. You're smart enough to take care of yourself, and I did take care of myself, and increasingly, them too. 2 years ago, when my father lost his management position at the manufacturing plant where he'd worked for 20 years, I stepped in. He was 55, too proud to take a lower-paying job but unqualified for anything comparable in our area. My mother worked part-time at an elementary school cafeteria, bringing in barely enough to cover groceries. It's just temporary, my father assured me when I offered to help with their mortgage. Just until I find something new. Temporary turned into permanent. My monthly contributions grew from covering just the mortgage to paying utility bills, car insurance, property taxes, and even Jake's private pitching coach. All while my parents maintained the narrative that I was the lucky one who had it easy with my computer job. I kept my growing resentment buried, telling myself, family helps family. But deep down, I knew I was being used. The breaking point came when I discovered a lump in my right testicle during a shower. I'd been ignoring various health concerns for years, the persistent fatigue, occasional sharp pains, night sweats, always putting checkups off because money was tight after supporting my family. This was different. This scared me. I made an appointment with a specialist, scheduled 3 weeks out, the earliest they could see me. I marked it clearly on the family calendar hanging in our kitchen. Everett, doctor, 1 p.m. For 21 days, that appointment sat on the calendar. No one mentioned it. No one asked if I was okay. It was just another day when Everett would be unavailable for family errands. Then, the night before my appointment, Jake burst into the house during dinner, eyes wild with excitement. Coach called. There's a special game tomorrow against Madison High. Their pitcher got injured, so they rescheduled with us. There'll be scouts from 3 Division I schools there. He was practically bouncing off the walls. My parents erupted in celebration, my father immediately calling relatives to share the news, my mother rushing to ensure Jake's uniform was pristine. What time is the game? I asked, already feeling a knot form in my stomach. 2 o'clock, Jake replied, not even looking at me as he texted his friends. You'll need to leave work early to drive me. Dad has that job interview, and Mom's car is still in the shop. I can't tomorrow, I said quietly. I have a doctor's appointment at 1. It's been scheduled for weeks. The room fell silent. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me in perfect synchronicity, all reflecting the same emotion: inconvenience. Well, obviously you'll reschedule, my father said dismissively. I can't. It's a specialist. The waiting list is months long. What kind of specialist? My mother asked, finally showing a flicker of concern. I hesitated. Oncology. I found a lump. The word hung in the air for approximately 2 seconds before Jake snorted. You're not dying, drama queen. It's probably nothing. Exactly, my father agreed. These doctors always want to run tests and charge you thousands for nothing. You can check it out later if it's still bothering you. What shocked me most wasn't their dismissal of my health concerns. It was how unsurprising their reaction was. This was the moment I realized that nothing would ever change, not unless I changed it. The final twist of the knife came when my father took me aside later that evening. Listen, Everett, I need to tell you something, but you can't get upset. He lowered his voice, glancing toward the kitchen where my mother was preparing Jake's favorite pregame meal for tomorrow. We've had to borrow your identity for a few things. What things? My voice was flat, already knowing nothing good could follow. Just some equipment loans for Jake. The sporting goods store has this great financing plan, but our credit wasn't good enough after the layoff. We used your social security number on a few applications. It's no big deal. We're making the payments. That was the moment when 27 years of being the family afterthought crystallized into perfect clarity. I wasn't just neglected. I was being actively exploited by the people who were supposed to love me most. The morning of my appointment dawned with unusual tension in the house. My father had left early for his interview, his first in months, leaving my mother to prepare Jake for his big game. I came downstairs in my work clothes, planning to head to the office for a few hours before my 1 o'clock appointment. Did you call to cancel yet? Jake asked without looking up from his phone, sprawled across the couch in his pajamas while ESPN played in the background. I'm not canceling, I replied, pouring coffee into my travel mug. I told you that last night. Jake's head snapped up, genuine confusion on his face. He wasn't used to me refusing him anything, but I need you to drive me. The game's at 2. I heard you the first time. My appointment is at 1. It'll probably run until at least 2:30, and the oncology center is across town from the baseball field. There's no way I can do both. So reschedule. This is important, Everett. So is this, I countered, feeling an unfamiliar surge of courage. I've been waiting weeks for this appointment. I need to get checked out. Jake threw his phone onto the couch cushion and stood up, his 6'2" frame towering over me despite my being the older brother. At 18, he'd already developed the physique of a professional athlete, thanks to years of training financed largely by my paycheck. You're being selfish, he said, his voice dropping to the dangerous tone I knew preceded his rare but violent temper tantrums. You know what this game means to me. My mother appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. What's going on? Everett won't take me to the game. He's still going to that stupid doctor appointment. My mother's face hardened. Everett, be reasonable. Your brother has scouts coming today. This could determine his entire future. And what about my future? I asked quietly. What if this is serious? She waved her hand dismissively. Don't be dramatic. You've always been a hypochondriac ever since you were little. That wasn't true. If anything, I'd neglected my health for years to avoid burdening the family finances. But the Thompson family had a remarkable ability to rewrite history to suit their narrative. Remember when you thought you had appendicitis and it was just gas? Jake snickered. Or when you were convinced you had meningitis during finals week? I was 12, I said through gritted teeth. And I had a migraine. You've always needed attention, my mother sighed. But today isn't about you. Jake needs this opportunity. And I need this appointment, I insisted. I'm not canceling. Jake stepped closer, invading my personal space. Cancel. The appointment. No. The slap came out of nowhere, his palm connecting with my cheek with enough force to make me stumble backward into the counter. My coffee mug crashed to the floor, shattering and splashing hot liquid across the tile. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth where my teeth had cut into my inner lip. I touched my cheek in shock, looking up to see not remorse on my brother's face, but righteous anger. More stunning than the physical assault was my mother's reaction, or lack thereof. "Now look what you've done," she snapped at me, grabbing a dish towel to mop up the spilled coffee, making a scene when Jake needs to focus on his game. "He hit me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You provoked him." My father's voice came from the doorway. He'd returned from his interview early, his expression grim. "I could hear you all from the driveway. Did you hear him hit me?" "Stop being so sensitive," my father scoffed. "Your brother is under tremendous pressure. These scouts could change his life. And what if I have cancer?" The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "What if I'm actually sick?" "Don't be ridiculous," my father said. "Always exaggerating for attention." "Selfish brat," Jake muttered. My mother stood up, coffee-soaked towel in hand, her eyes cold. "His future matters, Everett. Your life never did." The words struck harder than Jake's slap. I looked at each of them. My father with his permanent disappointment, my mother with her blatant favoritism, my brother with his entitled rage, and something inside me finally, irrevocably broke. "You know what?" I said, my voice steadying. "You're right. My life never mattered in this family. But that changes today." I walked to the drawer where we kept important documents and pulled out a folder. Inside were bank statements I'd discovered the previous week, credit card applications, personal loans, and financing plans, all in my name but with their contact information. Over $50,000 in debt that I'd never authorized. "Want to explain these?" I slapped the folder on the counter. "All these loans in my name that I never signed for?" My parents exchanged glances. My father recovered first. "We were going to tell you. It's for Jake's training equipment, special camps, private coaches, the kind of opportunities that could get him noticed. You committed identity theft against your own son." "Don't be so dramatic," my mother said. "It's just family, helping family. We've sacrificed everything for this family." "No," I corrected her. "I've sacrificed everything. My college fund, my savings, my credit score apparently, and now you want me to sacrifice my health too?" "One rescheduled appointment isn't," my father began. "It's not just the appointment," I shouted, startling all of them with my uncharacteristic outburst. "It's 27 years of being treated like I don't matter. 27 years of Jake needs this and Jake deserves that while I get nothing but bills and obligations." Jake rolled his eyes. "Here we go with the pity party." Something in me snapped. "You know what, Jake? I've paid for your pitching coach for the last 2 years. I've covered the mortgage on this house since Dad lost his job. I've worked 60-hour weeks, so this family doesn't lose everything. And not once, not once, has anyone said thank you." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face darkened with anger and shame, a dangerous combination. "If you walk out that door to your precious appointment instead of taking your brother to his game," he said slowly, "don't bother coming back." I looked at each of them one last time. These people who shared my blood but had never truly shared my life. "I'll be back later to get my things." The oncology center was quiet, antiseptic, with muted beige walls and outdated magazines in the waiting room. I sat alone, holding an ice pack to my swollen cheek, filling out paperwork with my uninjured hand. The nurse had raised an eyebrow at my appearance but hadn't commented. My phone buzzed continuously in my pocket, texts from Jake, increasingly angry, demanding to know where I was and how I could betray the family this way. My mother called 4 times, leaving voicemails that oscillated between guilt trips and threats. I silenced the phone and focused on the forms in front of me. Family history of cancer? I checked several boxes. My maternal grandfather had died of prostate cancer. An aunt on my father's side had battled breast cancer twice. These were facts I knew, but my family rarely discussed. They didn't fit neatly into the narrative of Jake's baseball destiny. Everett Thompson? A nurse called my name, leading me back to an examination room. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, listened carefully as I described finding the lump, the night sweats, the fatigue I'd been experiencing. "How long have you had these symptoms?" she asked, making notes in my chart. "The fatigue. Maybe a year. The lump. I noticed it about a month ago. And you waited that long to come in?" There was no judgment in her voice, just professional concern. "Family complications," I said simply. She nodded, then performed a thorough examination, her face revealing nothing as she palpated the lump and checked my lymph nodes. "We'll need to run some tests," she said finally. "Blood work today, and I want to schedule an ultrasound and possibly a biopsy depending on those results." "How serious do you think it is?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't say for certain until we get the test results, but testicular masses in men your age need to be taken seriously. It's good that you came in when you did." She paused. "Is there someone who can come with you to your follow-up appointments? A support person?" I thought about my family, probably at the baseball field now, furious at my absence. "No," I said quietly. "There's no one." After the appointment, I couldn't face going home. Instead, I called Adam, a colleague from work who had become something of a friend over the past year. We weren't particularly close, but he was the only person I could think of who might help. "Hey man, what's up?" he answered, the sounds of his gaming session audible in the background. "Adam, I hate to ask this, but is your offer still good? About your spare room?" Adam had mentioned a month ago that he was looking for a roommate after his last one moved out. I'd declined at the time, unwilling to leave my family without my financial support. "Yeah, it's still empty. You interested? I need a place to stay. Tonight, if possible." There must have been something in my voice, because Adam immediately turned serious. "Everything okay?" "Not really. I can explain when I see you. Is it okay if I come over now?" "Of course, man. I'll text you the address." I drove to Adam's apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in a complex about 20 minutes from my parents' house. On the way, my phone rang again. My father this time. Against my better judgment, I answered on speaker. "Where the hell are you?" he demanded without preamble. Jake's game started 30 minutes ago, and he had to get a ride with Coach Barnes. "I told you I wasn't canceling my appointment. So you're really choosing yourself over this family? After everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "What exactly have you done for me, Dad, besides stealing my identity and treating me like an ATM?" "We gave you everything," he shouted. "A roof over your head, food on the table, the roof that I'm currently paying for, the food I buy with my paycheck. You ungrateful little—" He cut himself off. "Jake struck out twice already. The scouts are leaving. His shot at a scholarship is ruined, and it's your fault." A week ago, those words would have crushed me under the weight of guilt and obligation. Today, they bounced off newly formed armor. "No, Dad. Jake's performance is Jake's responsibility, not mine." "Don't come home," he said, his voice cold. "We don't want you here. I'll be by tomorrow to get my things." I ended the call as I pulled into Adam's apartment complex. He was waiting for me in the parking lot, his expression changing to concern when he saw my face. "Dude, what happened to your cheek?" I touched the bruise, having almost forgotten it in the chaos of the day. Family disagreement. Adam helped me bring in the few belongings I had in my car. My laptop, a gym bag with a change of clothes, essential toiletries. It wasn't much to show for 27 years of life. "The spare room's through here," he said, leading me down a short hallway. "It's nothing fancy, but the bed's comfortable." The room was small but clean, with a twin bed, dresser, and desk. It was more personal space than I'd had in years, sharing the house with my family. "Thanks, Adam. I really appreciate this." "No problem. You want to talk about it?" I sat heavily on the bed, suddenly exhausted. My family's been using me, financially, emotionally. Today I finally stood up for myself, and it didn't go well. Adam nodded, not pushing for details. "Been there, man. Different circumstances, but I get it. Stay as long as you need." That night, I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, my phone continuing to light up with messages. I read through them, a barrage of guilt and blame from my parents and brother. From Jake. "Thanks for ruining everything. Scouts left before the 7th inning. Hope your stupid doctor visit was worth destroying my future. From Mom. After all we've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us? Your brother is devastated. From Dad. Don't bother coming by tomorrow. I've changed the locks. Let us know where to send your things. The last one made me laugh bitterly. They'd locked me out of a house I was paying for. The audacity was almost impressive. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but my mind raced with worries about my health, my finances, my future. The doctor had said they'd call with my blood test results within a few days. Until then, all I could do was wait. The next morning, I went to work as usual, throwing myself into coding projects to avoid thinking about the chaos of my personal life. Adam had left early for his shift at the IT help desk, leaving me a note with the Wi-Fi password and a spare key. By lunchtime, a new worry had surfaced. If my parents had taken out loans in my name, what else might they have access to? My bank accounts? My credit cards? I spent my lunch break on the phone with my bank, changing passwords and setting up fraud alerts. 3 days later, the doctor's office called. The blood tests showed elevated markers that concerned them. They wanted me to come in for an ultrasound and biopsy as soon as possible. We have an opening tomorrow at 10, the nurse said. I'll be there. I took the day off work, not telling anyone except Adam why I needed the time. He offered to drive me, but I declined. This was something I needed to face alone. The ultrasound technician was professional but warm, explaining each step as she spread cold gel on my testicle and moved the wand over the area. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to interpret the shadows on the screen or her occasional murmurs into her headset. The biopsy that followed was uncomfortable but quick, the doctor assuring me they would rush the results. We should know something in about 48 hours, he said. Try not to worry too much until then. Easier said than done. I returned to Adam's apartment and collapsed on the bed, physically and emotionally drained. My phone, which I'd kept on silent during the procedure, showed 15 missed calls, all from my mother. Sighing, I listened to the most recent voicemail. Everett, this has gone far enough. Her voice was tight with anger. Your father and I need to access the joint account to pay the mortgage, but the bank says the password has been changed. Call me back immediately. The joint account was my personal checking account that I'd added my father to years ago so he could deposit his occasional consulting checks. In reality, it had become the family account, with my parents withdrawing funds whenever they needed, rarely contributing anything. I deleted the voicemail without returning the call. The next day at work, my team lead Sarah noticed my distraction. Everything okay, Everett? You seem off your game lately. I hesitated, then decided a partial truth was better than none. Family issues, and some health concerns. I'm waiting on some medical test results. Her face softened with genuine concern, more than I'd seen from my actual family in years. I'm so sorry. Is there anything we can do to help? Just some flexibility with my schedule for follow-up appointments would be great. Of course. Just let me know what you need. Her simple kindness nearly broke me. I thanked her and retreated to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face until I regained composure. That evening, the doctor called earlier than expected. I stepped onto Adam's balcony for privacy, my heart pounding as I answered. Mr. Thompson? This is Dr. Chen. I have your biopsy results. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. Go ahead. The mass we biopsied is malignant. You have stage 2 testicular cancer. Despite suspecting it, hearing the words out loud made my knees buckle. I gripped the railing to steady myself. The good news, she continued, is that testicular cancer, even at stage 2, has an excellent prognosis with treatment. I'd like to refer you to an oncologist to discuss your options immediately. Cancer. I had cancer. At 27. Alone. Mr. Thompson? Are you still there? Yes, I managed. What? What happens now? Dr. Ramirez has an opening tomorrow morning at 9. His office will call you with details. Typically, treatment involves surgery to remove the affected testicle, followed by possible radiation or chemotherapy depending on the extent of spread. Surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. The words swirled in my mind like a toxic fog. Thank you, I said automatically. I'll be there tomorrow. After ending the call, I stood on the balcony for a long time, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed impossibly beautiful for such a terrible day. For the first time since leaving home, I allowed myself to cry, not for the family I'd lost, but for the uncertain future ahead. The oncologist's office was busier than I expected for a Thursday morning. People of all ages sat in the waiting room, some clearly in the midst of chemotherapy, others like me, newly diagnosed, eyes wide with fear barely contained. Dr. Ramirez was a tall man with a gentle manner that belied his direct approach. He explained my diagnosis and treatment plan with compassionate efficiency. "The good news is we caught it relatively early," he said, pointing to images on his computer screen. "The standard treatment is a radical orchiectomy, surgical removal of the affected testicle, followed by a course of chemotherapy to ensure we eliminate any cancer cells that might have spread to nearby lymph nodes." I nodded, trying to process the information through the fog of shock. "When would the surgery happen?" "I can schedule you for early next week. The procedure itself is straightforward, and you should be able to go home the same day." "And the chemotherapy?" "We'd start about 2 weeks after surgery, once you've had some time to heal. 3 cycles of BEP, bleomycin, etoposide, and cisplatin. Each cycle is 3 weeks, so about 9 weeks total. 9 weeks of chemotherapy." I did quick mental calculations about sick leave, health insurance, finances. "I have some concerns about payment," I admitted. "My insurance has a high deductible, and I'm currently between living situations." Dr. Ramirez nodded. "We have a financial counselor on staff who can walk you through options. Many patients qualify for assistance programs." As I left with a folder of information and a surgery date scheduled for Tuesday, the reality of my situation hit me anew. I had cancer. I was effectively homeless, and I had no family support system to help me through what was coming. Back at Adam's apartment, I found him in the kitchen making lunch. "Hey," he said, looking up from the sandwich he was assembling. "How did it go?" I set the folder on the counter. "It's cancer. Stage 2. Testicular cancer. I'm having surgery on Tuesday." Adam's face went through several emotions before settling on determination. "Okay, what do you need? I can take you to the hospital, pick up prescriptions, whatever." His immediate offer of help, with no hesitation, made a lump form in my throat that had nothing to do with cancer. "Just the ride would be great," I managed. "I won't be able to drive home after the anesthesia." "Consider it done. And you stay here as long as you need, man. Seriously." Over the weekend, I focused on practical matters, updating my company's HR department about my diagnosis, researching short-term disability options, and making a budget that accounted for the coming medical expenses. I deliberately avoided thinking about my family, but they hadn't forgotten about me. Sunday afternoon, my father showed up at Adam's apartment. I never found out how he got the address, perhaps from a mutual acquaintance or by following me from work. When Adam answered the door, my father pushed past him into the living room where I was working on my laptop. "Finally," he said, looking around the modest apartment with obvious disdain. "Your mother's been worried sick." "No, she hasn't," I replied calmly, closing my computer. "What do you want, Dad?" "We need to talk about the bank accounts and these ridiculous accusations you've been making about identity theft." "They're not accusations. I have proof of multiple loans taken out in my name without my knowledge or consent." "That's family business," he said dismissively. "Nothing for you to get worked up about." "It's fraud, Dad. It's a crime." His face darkened. "So you'd turn on your own family? After everything we've done for you?" "What exactly have you done for me lately?" I asked, "besides steal my identity and hit me when I wouldn't cancel a doctor's appointment?" "That was Jake, not me," he protested weakly. "And you stood there and let it happen, then blamed me for it." Adam, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. "I think you should leave, sir." My father turned to him, seeming to really notice him for the first time. "This doesn't concern you. It's my apartment, so yeah, it does," Adam replied. "Everett's staying here as long as he needs to." "He has a home," my father insisted. "With his family, where he belongs." I have cancer, Dad, I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us. For a brief moment, I thought I saw genuine concern flash across his face. What? Testicular cancer. Stage 2. I'm having surgery on Tuesday. He stared at me, processing this information. Is this some kind of trick to make us feel bad about the baseball game? The question was so absurd I actually laughed. Yes, Dad. I orchestrated an elaborate cancer diagnosis to make you feel bad about prioritizing Jake's baseball game over my health. You caught me. Don't take that tone with me, he snapped. But the effect was diminished by his obvious discomfort. If you're really sick, you should be at home where your mother can take care of you. I don't need taking care of. I need to focus on getting better without the constant drama and manipulation. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture I recognized from childhood as a sign of his frustration. Look, just come home. We can sort all this out as a family. There's nothing to sort out. I'm staying here, I'm getting treatment, and I'm dealing with the identity theft legally. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've filed a police report and frozen my credit. Any further attempts to use my social security number will be flagged as fraud. His face paled. You can't do that to your own family. Watch me. After my father left, Adam looked at me with new understanding. So that's what you meant by them using you. That's part of it, I confirmed. They've been financially abusing me for years. I just didn't have the courage to call it what it was until now. The surgery on Tuesday went as scheduled. A relatively straightforward procedure that removed my right testicle through a small incision in my groin. I woke up groggy from anesthesia to find Adam sitting beside my bed, playing a game on his phone. Hey, he said, looking up when he noticed I was awake. Doctor says it went well. No complications. Thanks for being here, I mumbled, still fuzzy from the drugs. No problem. They said you can go home once you're fully awake and can keep down some food and water. Home. The word had such different associations now. Not the house I grew up in, but Adam's apartment, a temporary sanctuary that had become my refuge. Recovery from surgery was relatively quick, but preparing for chemotherapy was another matter. My oncologist had warned me about the side effects: nausea, fatigue, hair loss. I decided to be proactive and shaved my head the weekend before my first treatment. Adam helped, wielding the clippers with exaggerated concentration that made me laugh despite my anxiety. Not bad, he said when finished, studying my newly bald head. You've got a good-shaped skull, man. Some guys look like aliens when they shave it all off. The first round of chemotherapy was worse than I'd anticipated. The nausea hit about 6 hours after treatment, sending me to the bathroom floor where I remained most of the night. Adam left water and crackers outside the door, checking on me periodically but giving me space to maintain what little dignity I had left. By the third day, I was feeling marginally better, weak and shaky, but able to keep down small meals. I was sitting at the kitchen table, forcing myself to eat a bowl of bland oatmeal, when someone knocked at the door. Adam was at work, so I dragged myself to answer it, expecting perhaps a package delivery. Instead, I found Jake standing in the hallway, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. "Jake," I said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" My brother stared at me, clearly shocked by my appearance. In the 3 weeks since he'd last seen me, I'd lost 15 pounds, shaved my head, and acquired the grayish pallor characteristic of chemotherapy patients. "You really do have cancer," he said, his voice small. "Did you think I was making it up?" I stepped back to let him in, too tired to maintain hostility. "Mom and Dad said." He trailed off, following me into the apartment. "They told me you were just trying to get attention, that you'd always been jealous of my baseball career and were making up health problems to sabotage me. The casual cruelty of this lie shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still did." "And you believed them?" I said, sitting heavily on the couch. Jake remained standing, looking around the apartment awkwardly. "They've never lied to me before. At least, I didn't think they had. What changed your mind?" He pulled out his phone, showing me a Facebook post from a mutual high school friend who worked as a nurse at the hospital where I'd had my surgery. She'd mentioned seeing me there, and hoping I recovered quickly from my serious health challenge. I asked her what was wrong with you, and she said she couldn't say much, but that you were facing cancer treatment. She seemed surprised I didn't know. I nodded, too exhausted to feel anything but a dull ache at this latest evidence of my parents' manipulation. So what kind is it? He asked, sitting gingerly on the edge of the armchair across from me. Testicular. Stage 2. I had surgery last week to remove the tumor, and I started chemo yesterday. Jake winced. That sounds rough. It's not great, I admitted. But the prognosis is good. Over 90% survival rate. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment before Jake spoke again. I'm sorry I hit you, he said quietly. I was freaking out about the scouts, but that's no excuse. No, it's not, I agreed. But I appreciate the apology. And I didn't know about the loans, he continued. Mom and Dad just told me we had money for training and equipment. I never questioned where it came from. Of course you didn't. You were raised to believe you deserved the best of everything, no matter the cost to anyone else. He flinched at my bluntness, but didn't argue. Dad's in trouble, he said after a moment. There's a police investigation. Something about embezzlement from his old company? This was news to me. Embezzlement. Are you sure? Jake nodded. 2 officers came to the house yesterday. I only heard parts of the conversation, but it sounded like they think Dad was taking money from his employer before he got laid off, and using your identity somehow to hide it. The pieces clicked into place. Why my father had been so resistant to my filing a police report. Why he'd been so desperate to maintain access to my bank accounts. He wasn't just funding Jake's baseball dreams. He was hiding stolen money. Is that why you came here? I asked. To warn me about the investigation? Partly, Jake admitted. But also, I wanted to see if you were really sick, and to say, I'm sorry. I've been thinking a lot about how we've treated you over the years. It wasn't fair. The understatement of the century, but a start. No, it wasn't, I agreed. But I'm not the same person anymore, Jake. I can't just forget everything and go back to how things were. I know. I don't expect you to. He hesitated. Can I? Would it be okay if I checked in on you sometimes? Maybe helped out with stuff while you're doing chemo? I studied my younger brother, seeing perhaps for the first time not the golden child who could do no wrong, but a confused teenager whose worldview was crumbling around him. I'd be okay with that, I said finally. But I have boundaries now, Jake, and I expect you to respect them. He nodded solemnly. I can do that. As he left, promising to text me later, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first step toward something new. The police investigation into my father's activities progressed faster than I expected. 2 weeks after Jake's visit, as I was recovering from my second round of chemotherapy, a detective contacted me requesting an interview. Detective Marissa Reynolds was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who met me at a coffee shop near Adam's apartment. I ordered tea, unable to stomach coffee during treatment, while she arranged files on the table between us. Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Thompson, she began formally. I understand you're dealing with health issues, so I appreciate your time. Call me Everett, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug, and I'm happy to help. I want to understand what's been happening myself. She nodded. Your initial report concerned identity theft. Loans and credit accounts opened in your name without your authorization. During our investigation, we discovered connections to a larger case involving Midwest Manufacturing, your father's former employer. Jake, my brother, mentioned something about embezzlement? That's correct. We have evidence suggesting your father diverted company funds over a period of approximately 3 years before his termination. The total amount appears to be just over $200,000. I nearly choked on my tea. 200,000? The method was quite sophisticated for an amateur, she continued. He created vendor accounts for non-existent services, approved the invoices himself, and directed payments to various accounts. After his termination, he appears to have used your identity to continue hiding these funds and to secure additional loans. I had no idea, I said truthfully. I knew about some loans for my brother's baseball equipment and training, but nothing on this scale. We don't believe you were involved, she assured me. The evidence indicates you were a victim in this situation. However, we do need your cooperation to build our case. I spent the next 2 hours going through financial documents, identifying which signatures were forgeries and which accounts I had no knowledge of. The scope of my father's deception was staggering. Not just the loans I'd discovered, but credit cards, investment accounts, even a second mortgage on the family home, all in my name. "What happens now?" I asked when we'd finished. "We have enough to move forward with charges," Detective Reynolds said, gathering her files. "Both against your father for the embezzlement and against both your parents for the identity theft. Given the amounts involved, these are serious felony charges." The reality of what this meant hit me suddenly. My parents could go to prison. That's a distinct possibility, yes. Especially your father, given the corporate theft component. She studied my face. Having second thoughts about cooperating, I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "They made their choices. I need to make mine." In the weeks that followed, my life fell into a strained routine. Chemotherapy 3 days a week, followed by recovery days where I could barely leave the bathroom. Work from home when I was able, using short-term disability when I wasn't. Weekly calls with the detective for updates on the case. Jake visited regularly, bringing groceries or just sitting with me through bad days. He'd moved into a friend's basement after our parents' assets were frozen as part of the investigation, finding a job at a local sporting goods store to support himself. "Coach Barnes says I can still practice with the team," he told me one evening as we watched a baseball game on Adams TV. "But without a scholarship, I can't afford college next year." "There are other options," I pointed out. "Community college, student loans, working while studying part-time." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm looking into all that. It's just different than what I expected." "Welcome to real life," I said, but without bitterness. It's rarely what we expect. 3 months after my initial diagnosis, 2 significant events occurred within days of each other. First, Dr. Ramirez informed me that my latest scans showed no evidence of remaining cancer. The treatment had worked. "We'll continue monitoring you closely," he cautioned, "with regular blood tests and scans for the next several years. But at this point, I'm comfortable saying you're in remission." The relief was indescribable. A weightlifting that I hadn't fully acknowledged was there. I called Adam from the hospital parking lot, then Jake, sharing the good news through tears I didn't try to hide. The second event was the notification that my parents' case was moving to court, with a hearing scheduled for the following week. I was required to testify. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing hallways. I wore my best suit, which hung loosely on my still-recovering frame. Adam came for moral support, sitting in the gallery while I waited to be called. I hadn't seen my parents since the day I'd left home. My father looked smaller somehow, his confident swagger replaced by a defeated slouch. My mother sat rigidly beside him, her face a mask of barely contained anger. When I was called to testify, I told the truth simply and directly. Yes, those were accounts opened in my name without my knowledge. No, I never authorized anyone to use my Social Security number for loans. Yes, I had been financially supporting my family for 2 years following my father's job loss. Throughout my testimony, I avoided looking directly at my parents, focusing instead on the attorney, asking questions, or the judge taking notes. But I could feel their eyes on me, my father's desperation, my mother's cold fury. As I stepped down from the witness stand, I passed the gallery where Jake Saturday, he'd arrived late, slipping in quietly during my testimony. His expression was a complex mix of emotions: shame, anger, grief. I nodded slightly to acknowledge his presence, then returned to my seat. The prosecution presented evidence of my father's embezzlement, falsified invoices, bank records showing transfers to personal accounts, emails discussing creative accounting with a former colleague who had turned state's witness. The defense tried to characterize it all as misunderstandings and accounting errors, but their arguments felt hollow against the mountain of evidence. During a recess, I stepped into the hallway for air and found Jake waiting. "I didn't know," he said immediately, "about Dad stealing from his company, about all those loans in your name. I swear." "I believe you," I said, and realized it was true. Jake had been as much a pawn in our parents' game as I had been, just one who received benefits rather than burdens. They told me you were testifying against them because you were jealous, he continued, that you were making up lies because you resented my baseball success. I shook my head. The bank records don't lie, Jake. I know that now. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture unconsciously mimicking our father. I don't understand how they could do this. To you, to the company, to our family. Dad always believed the rules didn't apply to him, I said. And Mom would justify anything if it benefited you. It was the perfect storm of entitlement and favoritism. Jake winced. I'm part of the problem, too. I believed I deserved special treatment, that my baseball career was more important than anything else, including your health. It was the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard him say. You were a kid raised to believe that, I pointed out. You're 18 now. What you do with that realization is up to you. We returned to the courtroom for the judge's decision on whether the case would proceed to trial. Given the evidence, he ruled there was more than sufficient cause to move forward. My father was taken into custody due to flight risk concerns, a determination supported by the discovery of recently purchased one-way tickets to Mexico in his and my mother's names. As officers led my father away, he finally looked directly at me. Everett, he called across the courtroom. Son, please, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. The desperation in his voice might once have swayed me, triggered my ingrained response to sacrifice myself for family harmony. But that person no longer existed. No more lies, Dad, I said quietly. My mother, released on bail with strict monitoring, attempted to approach me outside the courthouse. Adam stepped protectively closer, but I gestured for him to give us space. Are you satisfied now? She hissed, her perfect housewife facade cracking to reveal the bitterness beneath. Your father's going to prison because you couldn't keep family business private. He's going to prison because he stole $200,000 and committed identity theft, I corrected her. And you're likely joining him. After everything we did for you? Save it, Mom. I don't believe that line anymore. I started to walk away, then turned back with one final thought. You know what the saddest part is? If you'd just asked for help, really asked, not demanded or manipulated, I would have given it freely. That's what family is supposed to do. I left her standing on the courthouse steps, her mouth open but no sound coming out. For perhaps the first time in my life, I'd rendered Patricia Thompson speechless. Jake caught up with me at the parking lot. Can I get a ride? I took the bus here. Sure, I said, unlocking my car. Adam excused himself to give us privacy, saying he'd catch an Uber back to the apartment. We drove in silence for several minutes before Jake spoke. What happens now? The case goes to trial, unless they accept a plea deal. Either way, Dad's likely going to prison for a significant time. Mom too, possibly, though probably a shorter sentence. No, I mean with us. With you and me. I considered the question as I navigated through downtown traffic. I don't know, Jake. We're not going to suddenly be best friends after everything that's happened, but we're still brothers. We can figure out a new relationship on better terms. I'd like that, he said quietly. Me too. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a start. The trial date was set for 6 weeks later. During that time, my life continued its gradual return to something resembling normalcy. My hair began growing back, though now with scattered patches of gray despite my young age. I regained some of the weight I'd lost during treatment, and my energy levels improved enough that I could return to the office part-time. Adam had officially asked me to take over the spare room's lease, transforming my temporary sanctuary into a more permanent home. I agreed, grateful for his friendship and support through the darkest period of my life. Jake had enrolled in community college courses for the fall semester, working evenings and weekends at the sporting goods store to save for tuition. He still played baseball, but as a hobby rather than a career path, joining a local league for players over 18. The pressure removed, he seemed to enjoy the sport again for the first time in years. We met weekly for lunch, slowly rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. Without our parents' toxic influence constantly pitting us against each other, we discovered shared interests and compatible senses of humor. Did you ever resent me growing up? He asked during one of these lunches, picking at his French fries. For the way Mom and Dad treated us differently? Not you, I answered honestly. Them, yes. But you were just a kid getting what every kid deserves: support and encouragement. It wasn't your fault they couldn't find room to support both of us. The morning of the trial arrived bright and clear, a beautiful September day that belied the heaviness of what lay ahead. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit that now fit properly again, my health mostly restored after the grueling cancer treatment. The courthouse was more crowded this time. Local media had picked up the story of corporate embezzlement and family identity theft. A reporter approached as I walked up the steps, microphone extended. "Mr. Thompson, how do you feel testifying against your own parents today?" I sidestepped the question and the reporter, entering the building with my head down. Inside, I found Jake already waiting, nervously adjusting his tie, his only suit clearly borrowed or thrifted, slightly too large across the shoulders. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside him on the hard wooden bench. "Not really," he admitted, "but I need to be here." The trial itself was both exhausting and surreal. The prosecution methodically laid out the case against our parents, the embezzled funds, the identity theft, the planned escape to Mexico. Bank records, forged signatures, and falsified documents created a damning portrait of calculated, long-term fraud. My father's defense centered on desperation, a man trying to provide for his family after losing his job, making poor choices under pressure. My mother's attorney attempted to portray her as an unwitting accomplice, simply following her husband's lead without understanding the legal implications. When I took the stand, I told my story plainly. Yes, I had supported the family financially after my father's job loss. No, I never authorized them to use my identity for loans or credit cards. Yes, I discovered the fraud while dealing with a cancer diagnosis that my family had pressured me to ignore in favor of my brother's baseball game. My father wouldn't meet my eyes during my testimony. My mother stared unblinkingly, her expression a mix of betrayal and contempt that still had the power to make me feel momentarily small. The most surprising testimony came from Jake. Called as a witness for the defense, he was expected to paint a picture of devoted parents who had sacrificed everything for their children's futures. Instead, he told the truth. "My parents taught me that my baseball career was more important than anything or anyone else," he said clearly into the microphone. "They told me my brother's health concerns were just attempts to get attention and sabotage my future. They encouraged me to believe I deserved special treatment, that rules didn't apply to me because I had talent." Our mother made a small, wounded sound from the defense table. Jake continued, his voice steady. "When Everett was diagnosed with cancer, they lied to me about it. They told me he was making it up for sympathy. I only found out the truth when a friend who works at the hospital mentioned seeing him there." The prosecutor nodded encouragingly. "And what happened when you confronted your parents about this deception?" "They said Everett had always been jealous of me, that he was trying to ruin our family. They told me not to contact him." Jake swallowed hard. "I went to see him anyway. He was clearly very sick. He'd lost weight, lost his hair from chemotherapy. He could barely stand up. And that's when I realized my parents had been lying to me my entire life." In the gallery, I felt an unexpected surge of pride for my younger brother. This couldn't be easy for him, dismantling the family mythology that had centered him as the golden child. The defense attorneys tried to salvage something from Jake's testimony, suggesting he was confused or manipulated by me, but the damage was done. The jury saw not devoted parents driven to desperate measures, but calculating manipulators who had exploited both their children in different ways. During the lunch recess, Jake and I sat on a bench outside the courthouse, sharing a sandwich from the cafe across the street. "You did good in there," I told him. He shrugged. "I just told the truth." Finally, the courtroom was tense when the jury returned after 2 days of deliberation. The foreman, a gray-haired woman in a navy blazer, stood to deliver the verdict. "In the matter of State versus Gerald Thompson, on the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. On the charges of identity theft and credit fraud, we find the defendant guilty." My father seemed to physically shrink with each pronouncement, his shoulders curving inward as if trying to disappear. "In the matter of State versus Patricia Thompson, on the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of credit fraud, we find the defendant guilty." My mother remained rigid, her face a mask of disbelief even as the verdicts were read. The judge thanked the jury for their service and announced that sentencing would occur the following week. My father was immediately taken into custody as a flight risk. My mother, deemed less likely to flee, was allowed to remain free on bail until sentencing. As the courtroom began to clear, Jake and I stood to leave. A commotion near the defense table caught my attention. My father had broken away from the bailiff and was rushing toward the gallery. "Everett! Jake!" he called desperately. "Please, tell them you forgive me. Tell the judge it was all for the family." The bailiff caught up, restraining him firmly, but professionally. My father continued pleading as they led him away. "I was trying to give Jake his shot. Don't you understand? Everything I did was for this family." Jake stepped forward, his expression pained but resolute. "No, Dad. Everything you did was for your ego. You wanted a son in the major leagues so you could brag about it. You wanted to look successful even after you lost your job. None of it was for me or Everett. It was all for you." In that moment, I saw my younger brother truly grow up, shedding the last vestiges of the entitled child our parents had raised, and becoming someone more thoughtful, more aware. Our mother approached us in the hallway as we left, her composure restored but brittle around the edges. "I hope you're satisfied," she said coldly. "Your father's going to prison, our home is being seized, and our family is destroyed." "You destroyed the family," Jake responded before I could. "You and Dad, not us. After everything we sacrificed for you." "Stop," Jake interrupted. "Just stop with that line. You didn't sacrifice for me. You invested in me like I was a stock you expected returns from. That's not love, Mom. That's exploitation." She recoiled as if slapped. "How dare you speak to me that way? I am your mother." "Yes," Jake agreed quietly. "You are. And I still love you, even after everything. But I don't respect you anymore, and I won't let you manipulate me again." He turned to me. "Ready to go?" We left our mother standing alone in the courthouse hallway, surrounded by strangers filing past, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Outside in the sunlight, Jake took a deep breath. "That was harder than I expected." "You did the right thing," I assured him. "For yourself, and for them too, whether they can see it or not. Do you think they'll ever understand what they did wrong?" I considered the question carefully. Dad might, eventually, with enough time to reflect. Mom, I'm not sure. Her identity is too wrapped up in being the perfect mother raising the perfect athlete son. Admitting she failed at that might break her completely. Jake nodded thoughtfully. "I used to think I had the perfect family, the perfect life. Now I realize it was all built on lies and pressure and using people." "Not all of it," I said. "Your talent is real. Your hard work was real. Those things belong to you, not them." "Thanks, Ev." He used the childhood nickname he hadn't called me in years. That means a lot. As we walked to the parking lot, a flock of geese flew overhead in perfect V formation, heading south for the winter. Watching their synchronized movement against the clear blue sky, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my adult life. The worst was behind us. What lay ahead was up to us to define. The sentencing hearing occurred the following week, a more subdued affair than the trial itself. My father received 8 years for the embezzlement and an additional 3 years for the identity theft and fraud charges to be served concurrently. With good behavior, he could be eligible for parole in 6 years. My mother received 3 years, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. Both were ordered to make restitution, to my father's former employer for the embezzled funds, and to me for the fraudulent loans and damage to my credit. The family home and most of their assets were seized to begin paying these judgments. Jake and I spent a somber weekend boxing up personal items we wanted to keep. Family photos, a few heirlooms, childhood mementos. Most of the furniture and accumulated possessions of 30 years would be sold at auction. "It's weird," Jake said as we sorted through the garage. "I spent my whole life in this house, but I don't feel that attached to it anymore." I understood the sentiment. The physical structure had stopped being home to me long before I actually left. Home was about safety, acceptance, and love, things I'd never truly had in that house. In the year that followed, Jake and I created new lives for ourselves, separate but connected in a healthier way than before. He completed his first semester at community college with surprisingly good grades, discovering an aptitude for business courses that he'd never explored while focused exclusively on baseball. "I might transfer to Ohio State after I get my associate's degree," he told me over dinner one evening. "Maybe study sports management or business administration." "That sounds perfect for you," I agreed, "using your knowledge of sports in a different way." "I still play on weekends with the league," he added. "But it's fun again, you know? No scouts, no pressure, just the game." My own life had stabilized into a new normal. I remained cancer-free, though with regular checkups that would continue for years. Adam and I became good roommates, our shared experience through my illness, cementing a friendship that felt like chosen family. At work, I received a promotion to senior software engineer, my performance strong enough that the company had been willing to accommodate my medical needs during treatment. With the higher salary, I began rebuilding my savings and credit score, both decimated by my parents' fraud and my medical expenses. I even started dating again, meeting Sarah, the lawyer who had helped me navigate the identity theft issues, for coffee that evolved into dinner, and eventually into something more serious. She understood trauma and recovery, both professionally and from her own experiences with a difficult family. We moved at a careful pace, both of us mindful of our tendency to caretake at our own expense. 14 months after the sentencing, Jake and I made the 3-hour drive to visit our mother at the minimum security women's facility where she was serving her sentence. It was our third visit since her incarceration, each one a complex emotional experience. The visiting room was brighter than I'd expected the first time, large windows letting in natural light, tables spaced for semi-private conversations. No glass barriers or telephones like in the movies, just a large room with rules about limited physical contact and vigilant guards. Our mother had aged dramatically in prison, her once carefully maintained appearance now marked by gray roots and lines that hadn't been there before. Yet there was something else too, a quietness, a reflectiveness that was new. "You both look good," she said after the initial awkward greetings. "Jake, have you gotten taller?" "Same height, Mom," he said with a small smile. "Just standing straighter, maybe." We updated her on our lives. Jake's classes, my promotion, the mundane details of everyday existence that somehow seemed more precious in this setting. She listened more than she spoke, a reversal of our previous dynamic. "I've been meeting with the prison counselor," she said eventually, "talking about things, our family, my choices." Jake and I exchanged glances. This was new. "That's good, Mom," I said cautiously. "She says I have narcissistic tendencies." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Apparently I've been using my children as extensions of myself, rather than seeing you as separate people, particularly you, Jake." The admission hung in the air between us. My mother had never acknowledged any fault in her parenting before. "Is that something you agree with?" Jake asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "I wanted so badly for you to be special, for our family to be special. When your father lost his job, lost his status, I couldn't accept being ordinary, being failures." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "And I couldn't see that we were hurting you, Everett. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." It wasn't a complete apology, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from her. Prison, it seemed, had provided something my mother had avoided her entire life, the opportunity for self-reflection. "We're working on a family counseling session," she continued. "The three of us, if you're willing. Your father too, eventually, though at a different facility." "I'd like that," Jake said immediately. I was more hesitant. "I'll think about it." She nodded, accepting this without the guilt trip she would have deployed in the past. "That's fair. It's your choice." As the visit ended and we prepared to leave, she reached out to touch my hand briefly. The limited contact allowed by prison rules. "I'm sorry about your cancer, Everett. I should have been there for you. A mother should be there when her child is suffering." The simple statement, delivered without excuses or justifications, loosened something tight in my chest. "Thank you for saying that, Mom." On the drive home, Jake and I processed the visit, both struck by the changes in our mother. "Do you think it's real?" he asked. "The counseling, the The self-awareness? Or is she just saying what she thinks we want to hear? I think it might be real, I said after consideration. Prison has a way of stripping away pretenses, and she's had nothing but time to think about how she ended up there. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? Completely, I mean. The question deserved a thoughtful answer. I don't think forgiveness is a destination, I said finally. It's more of a process. Some days I feel it more than others. But I'm not carrying the anger I used to, and that's freedom enough for now. Jake nodded, understanding. I'm still sorting through it all, trying to figure out who I am without their expectations defining me. You're doing well with that, I assured him. Better than I was at your age. He grinned. I had a good example of how to break free. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn Sunday, Jake and I hosted a small gathering at my new apartment, a larger place I'd rented after Sarah, and I decided to move in together. Adam was there with his new girlfriend, along with a few friends from work and Jake's college roommate. The occasion was dual, celebrating 2 years of my cancer remission and Jake's acceptance to Ohio State's business program for the following fall. Sarah had baked a cake, decorated with a baseball made of frosting, a nod to Jake's past and the sport he still loved, just differently now. As we sat around the living room sharing stories and laughter, I caught Jake watching me with a thoughtful expression. What? I asked when our guests were distracted by Adam's animated retelling of a workplace mishap. I was just thinking about how different everything is from 2 years ago, he said quietly. Remember that day when I hit you? When we all said those terrible things to you about your doctor's appointment? Hard to forget, I admitted. If you had given in, canceled your appointment to drive me to that game, you might not have caught the cancer in time. And I'd still be the entitled jerk our parents raised me to be. And I'd still be enabling everyone at my own expense, I added. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most necessary changes. Jake raised his glass in a subtle toast. To standing your ground when it matters most. I clinked my glass against his. To finding yourself when everything falls apart. Later, after our guests had gone and Sarah was cleaning up in the kitchen, Jake helped me break down the folding tables we'd used for the party. I got a letter from Dad yesterday, he said. He's taking classes in prison. Accounting, ironically enough. Good for him, I said, and meant it. He asked if you ever read his letters. I shook my head. Not yet. I'm not there yet, Jake. Maybe someday. That's okay. I told him you're doing really well. That we both are. As Jake left that evening, hugging me tightly at the door, I felt the full circle of our journey. From the brother who had struck me in entitlement and rage, to this thoughtful young man taking responsibility for his life and choices, from the doormat who had subsidized his own exploitation to someone who had found his voice and boundaries. Walking back into the apartment, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My hair had grown back fuller than before, the new gray strands glinting in the light. Sarah came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her chin on my shoulder. Happy? She asked simply. I considered all I had lost and all I had gained. The family myths destroyed, the authentic connections built, the cancer conquered, the future reclaimed. Yes, I answered. I really am. Sometimes the hardest walk away becomes the most important journey forward. By refusing to cancel my doctor's appointment that day, I hadn't just saved my physical life, I'd reclaimed my entire existence. And in that process, I'd given Jake the chance to become someone better than our parents had imagined for him. Someone real, with flaws and strengths, and genuine choices. Sometimes losing what hurts you is the greatest gain of all. And your true worth isn't measured by others' assessments, but by your courage to value yourself when no one else will. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved for your own well-being? What gave you the strength to take that first step? Comment below and share your story. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more content like this, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself.